Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.
State Representative Joe Sanfelippo of New Berlin is a Republican seeking re-election in the 15th Assembly District. Joe, welcome back to WisconsinEye.
Thanks for having me, Steve. I greatly appreciate it.
Well, you're chairman of Assembly Health Committee, and you've seen the ads from Governor Evers and Democrats saying people like you should be in session responding to the COVID-19. So I want to give you a chance to respond to those accusations that you haven't met to respond to the pandemic, sir. Can we start there?
Sure. You know, we met earlier this year and we passed some legislation to do things to help make it easier for people to collect unemployment and make sure that the hospitals and the resources were there that they needed. But beyond that, I think we have to remember that this is a virus. There's nothing that government can do. You know, we can't wave a magic wand and make it go away. We can take precautions to try to lessen the inflow of people into hospitals, which is what was done earlier this year. And then it turns out, I think that the hospitals have learned a lot throughout the process. You know, at the beginning, they were just putting everybody on a ventilator. And then they decided that that actually was causing more harm than good. So they've improved in their treatment level. But we have to realize that, you know, there isn't a lot we can do as politicians, but we need to sit back, let the medical community figure this out, give them the resources they need to do it, and let them do it. Let the professionals handle it. And that's exactly what we're doing.
Well, how do you feel about the governor's executive orders? Number one on masks, and number two, the 25% occupancy limit, sir?
Well, on the mask order, I mean, first and foremost, you know, wearing a mask is not a big deal. I don't think that's the issue. Where I have a problem with the governor is the way he has put these orders in place. You know, there's state statutes, there's a state constitution, there's a process very clearly laid out that requires involvement by the legislature. The governor seems to think that he's the only branch of government and that the legislative and the judicial branches don't exist and he can just do whatever he wants. And I think that's where the disagreement comes in. I am confident that had the governor have come to the legislature to say, you know, these are the things that I think need to be done, and here's the reasons why, once we see the data to back up those decisions, I'm confident that we would have passed some type of mask order ourselves, you know, whether it was statewide or a little more targeted, you know, could be up for discussion. But the fact is the governor just has completely cut us out of the process.
What are the businesses in the 15th Assembly District telling you about the 25% occupancy limit, sir?
Yeah, you know, that's really a hardship. The businesses are struggling because for the most part, you know, your fixed costs when you run a business go on at 100% no matter what. So whether you have 10 customers in your restaurant or 100 customers, your fixed costs are still the same. So when government mandates that they can only operate at 25% of capacity, what they're doing is mandating that they operate their business at a loss. So I have many business owners that are telling me it's better for them just to close their doors down. And in many cases, they're not reopening. So I think, again, you know, the governor's making these decisions. We don't know what data he's using to make these types of decisions. I haven't seen anything in the news to come out to say that, you know, any restaurant or any grocery store or any business has been significantly responsible for increasing the virus. Yet he issued these orders, again, without involving the legislature. And so we're just kind of left in the dark wondering, what is he doing?
Well, you talked earlier about the progress and the toll that COVID has taken on hospitals. So here's my question. In the next budget, should hospitals be an even greater priority than maybe they are in the current one, given they're on the front lines of the COVID fight?
I think yes. As chairman of the health committee, I work closely with all of the hospitals and the hospital association and medical professionals and doctors and nurses and everybody involved in this battle. And when you talk about hospitals, I mean, they've had a very difficult situation this year because when this thing first came on, nobody knew what to expect. So, of course, they canceled a lot of their elective surgeries and things, and that's what helps keep their lights on, right? So I think we're going to have to take a look at how we can help all of the hospitals, but specifically we need to look at the hospitals that handle a large share of Medicaid patients, right? So continuing the dish payments that we've done in the past is going to be very important, and maybe even increasing them is going to be needed so that we can help get the hospitals through this crisis so we can get back to normal.
Have you signed on the representative board and Senator capping a bill that says if you're a organization, charity, business, and you adopt COVID-19 protocols, you cannot be sued over COVID-19? Joe?
I haven't signed on to the bill, but I do support it. I think that, in this litigious society, we always have to worry that you're going to have some lawyers that are going to want to try to take advantage of the situation and put some honest, hardworking businesses out of business. So I think that that's a bill that's worth exploring and looking into.
The Federal Reserve said in the second quarter, Wisconsin's gross domestic product dropped 8%. That raises questions about tax collections in our current fiscal year. I'll make up a number, if we don't collect $1 billion that we had expected, what would be your approach to filling that shortfall?
We have to cut spending, plain and simple. I mean, over the last several budgets, I think that we've overall done a good job of budgeting, especially if you look at the current budget. Governor Evers had proposed a budget that started with a $2 billion structural deficit. And we just see the first year of the budget come in now. And thanks to the work that the Republican Joint Finance Committee had done, we have a $1 billion surplus. But I think that in the long range, we cannot raise taxes. We've already hurt our local businesses by having these shutdown orders and now the capacity orders and things like that. If we try to raise taxes, that's going to be the final nail in the coffin for the businesses. And it's going to hurt a lot of people who are on unemployment and who lost their jobs. So spending would be the only way that I would consider trying to fill any gap.
As states around Wisconsin, including Illinois, legalize medical and recreational marijuana, remind me of your position on those issues, please.
Yeah, once again, as chairman of the health committee, this is something that I have studied extremely closely. And there is no leading medical organization that recommends marijuana for the medicinal purposes. So I do not support it at all. What I would support is more research, right? I think the federal government should loosen it up, the rules on research, so that more research could be done, because, we hear anecdotal stories of how it does help certain individuals. So if there's something there that can be helpful, I think we should look into it. But, once again, us as politicians, you see a lot of states rushing to legalize all this, but we have the medical community, the experts telling us, whoa, not so fast. There's nothing proven here to help.
The governor wants a next set of congressional and legislative boundaries to be drawn by a People's Maps Commission, which would forward it to the legislature to be enacted. What's your response to the governor's plan?
Well, he calls it a bipartisan commission, but all the members of the plan are appointed by him. So it's really not bipartisan. It's just a strong Democratic appointed commission. Look, this process has been in place since the beginning of our statehood back in 1848. It has always worked fine. It has never been a problem until the Democrats were not in complete control. And then they started raising issues that, hey, they're crying foul. There's nothing foul here with what happened. If you go back to 2010, when the Republicans took control of both houses of the legislature and the governor's mansion, those were under old maps that were not drawn by Republicans. So the process is working just fine. I don't think that you're ever going to be able to get a completely bipartisan commission, and I don't see any need to make changes.
The debate over policing reforms has landed on our front door in Kenosha. The governor's got 9 bills. Senator Van Wanggaard has got 7 or 8. The Black Caucus has bills. My question is this: is there any policing reforms that you're convinced should be enacted into law?
You know, there may be some ideas worth looking at, but I think we have to just, take a deep breath and kind of step back from this whole thing for a minute. I mean, nobody's saying they're not bad police officers, right? I mean, you have bad employees in any profession, doctors, teachers, lawyers, whatever the case. But to paint or to taint an entire profession like somehow there's some type of inherent problems there, I just think is unfair. If you take a look at our police communities here in Wisconsin especially, but even throughout the country, I don't know that there is a massive need for reform. So to the extent that, some of these proposals are being made, for example, defund the police departments. I mean, that's one of the craziest ideas, quite frankly, that I have ever heard. Especially in these times, we are seeing crime explode in the state of Wisconsin. Here in the Milwaukee area, the city of Milwaukee is on pace to have the highest number of murders in any one year. This year, we're over 150 now, I believe, and we're on pace to break 200. And so, and yet you see Mayor Barrett turning around and saying, well, we're going to cut the police force drastically to fill a budget hole. That's the absolute wrong thing to do. People want to be safe in their neighborhoods, and so we need to support law enforcement. Now, to the extent that there is a bad law enforcement officer, then him or her needs to be held accountable by the system and let the chips fall where they may. But I don't believe that we should taint the entire profession because of a couple of bad actors.
Wisconsin is a high property tax state, which is why for more than 20 years, school districts and local governments have had to live with caps and limits on their property tax levies. In the next state budget, should those caps and limits on property tax levies be continued?
Definitely not. As you mentioned, we are one of the highest tax states. So, they should be continued.
They should be continued.
Yes, they should be continued. I think that, I have always favored looking at other avenues to generate revenue, right? So I would look at sales tax increases and try to put more of our tax collections onto sales tax as opposed to property tax. I think property tax payers here carry a great burden in our state with the way we tax not only our local municipalities, but the school districts too, right? And if you think about it, who do we hurt the most with high property taxes? You hurt the young families who are trying to purchase a home and raise a family. And the taxes are so high that it makes their payments unaffordable. And then we're hurting senior citizens who are retired, but their taxes are so high that they can't afford to stay in their own home. So we need to find a better way. And I believe sales tax would be a better way to fund a lot of these programs.
Well, now you're speaking of the state sales tax, but here's my question. Do we need to reduce the reliance on the property taxes, do we need to give cities, villages, and towns other revenue options? I guess I'm speaking about Representative Goyke's bill. If Milwaukee residents passed a referendum, the city could levy a half-cent sales tax. Do we need to give local governments different revenue sources?
There are at the county level mainly, there are some options out there for additional revenue sources. And I think we've seen, some counties take advantage of them, some of them don't. I would prefer to see more of a uniform statewide approach. So if we need to raise aid to local governments and school boards, then I think I would rather see us do it at a statewide level on the sales tax and then send the money to the localities based on how it's collected. But, when you start having patchwork of different tax rates, it affects people's purchasing decisions. And so you create suffering for the businesses in your district. If I'm a small store, an appliance store, let's say, and somebody's going to buy a $600 or $700 item or even $1,000 item, but they can go 5 blocks down into a different county and pay less money on sales tax, they're going to do that. And that's through no fault of my own, but I've suffered an injury there, lose the business.
Knowing how you have followed the State Department of Transportation programs, my question is, last year, Governor Evers recommended a gas tax increase to stabilize how we pay for highways and bridges. Is a gas tax increase a non-starter with you?
No, I have never been opposed to raising revenue for the department. But what I was opposed to is just continuing to pour money in there without building some more efficiencies into the agency first, right? So we need to stop the problems or fix the problems and then see exactly how much more funding we need. I think Secretary Thompson has done a great job. The Senate hasn't confirmed him, but I like a lot of the things that he's done in the agency. I've had a lot of contact with him and his agency on matters. They keep us informed. They're putting a design build in process now, which is a bill that I championed for many sessions and finally got it through this session. And I think that's going to create some tremendous savings. And so once we have the spending under control, then I think we will be able to have a better picture of just how much of a revenue increase is required.
If a school district or local government plans a major public works project, should they have to give a preference to Wisconsin businesses, Joe?
I'm not one that favors preferences. I think that we need to keep a completely open market. Where I am okay with them is if all else is equal, cost, quality, everything on the line is pretty much equal, then you go ahead and give a little nod to the local company, that I would be fine with. But to give some type of a 5 or 10% mandate preference, I just don't like those. I think that anytime you start dabbling and interfering with those types of business decisions, all you do is end up causing your costs to go up.
Last question, differences between you and your opponent on 2 weeks from today, November 3.
Yeah. Well, we talked about crime for the first one. My opponent is in favor of, not holding violent criminals responsible. She has mentioned in the past that, we shouldn't have people in jail, especially if they didn't create or commit a violent crime, right? But so would that be an 8th or 9th time drunk driver? You're going to let them out because they didn't really create a violent crime, but they are a danger to society. So she doesn't want to hold criminals accountable. And that's one of the things that I've worked on for many sessions, is keeping our communities safe. I think the other one is she wants to expand government health care, right, by expanding Badger Care. And I think that that's a mistake. People should be able to make their own decisions when you're in a government program. A lot of times that's limited. But the biggest problem with that is we don't have enough doctors and nurses to take care of our Badger Care members now. So if you put a large number of people into the Badger Care program, all you're doing is putting additional strain on an already overly strained system, and it's going to result in poor care and bad treatment for others and for the individuals involved. So that's not the option to go. And then in the end, I think it's just, I have a proven record to work on. I think that, you and I have done many interviews in the past. I don't like to brag, but I've been one of the hardest working legislators in Madison. This session alone, we drafted over 80 bills. At one point, Leg Council had assigned me a drafter just to my office because we do so much work that we have so much coming out. But, we're a very active office. And my belief is if you're going to hold this office, you can't just sit in the chair and do nothing. You actually have to try to get something done. And, some of the ideas that we've worked on, have come to fruition and been passed into law, and some haven't. But I think, we keep working on them. Mandatory car insurance is one of those, right? We have people driving without insurance and without licenses, and nothing is done right now. That's a huge problem in our area. I get contact almost weekly from people who are having those problems. And so, again, holding people accountable to follow the law, I think, is going to be a big difference between myself and my opponent. And my track record, I have a proven track record of, both working in the building and in the community with my local elected officials, law enforcement people, the medical community, that, I listen to what their concerns are and work with them to find solutions.
Thank you. State Representative Joe Sanfelippo of New Berlin is a Republican seeking re-election in the 15th Assembly District. The election is November 3. Joe, thanks for talking to WisconsinEye.
Hey, thanks for having me. I always appreciate being on.
Thank you very much.
Campaign 2020 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Quick Trip, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, and Wisconsin Operating Engineers Local 139.